Tons of news today. Let's start with this. It looks like the Starfield Bundle will include the game with Ryzen 7000 CPUs as well as RX 6000 and 7000 GPUs, and it looks like that will start on July 11th, which is tomorrow as of the time of filming and releasing this video. Well, this doesn't seem to have been intentionally officially announced by AMD yet. It did show up on their on AMD Taiwan with the event open login times as of July 11th at 9 p.m. So anyway, it looks like this is here. Now, this had earlier been leaked as basically showing up on a Newegg bundle page before this was supposed to be announced. But anyway, this is more confirmation that this should actually be happening, and that would, add some value to your game. Although this has also stirred up all the controversy about whether or not AMD will be including, will be blocking DLSS from inclusion with the game, and all the controversy that has stirred up. I've already talked about that enough, though. However, a lot of the comments about that seem to be saying, well, Nvidia's done worse. And I don't like these arguments because just because one company does something bad or anti-consumer does not mean we should then just be like, okay, so then all other companies should too. I think we should hold all companies accountable if they're doing something kind of shady, anti-competitive, anti-consumer. And that brings up this next story, which I need to be very, very clear. There is, just like with the AMD blocking DLSS thing, there's a lot of evidence, and AMD has a lot of very suspicious no comments, but we don't have 100% confirmation of that taking place. It's just rather suspicious, and AMD's had plenty of chances to deny it, but has chose not to. This next story here is claiming in a rumor, and that is important to note, this is not confirmed, that Nvidia does not want to see more Intel GPUs from its partners. In other words, the claim here, this is a videocards.com article, and all my sources will be in the video description today. But the claim here is that Nvidia is trying to pressure its board partners into not working with Intel on their next generation of GPUs. This article here is from videocards.com, although the information is coming from Pro High Tech, which I believe is a fairly large Russian language outlet. And they're claiming sources, and again, I think this is machine learning translated and is a little bit hard to read. The comment section of this videocards.com article did have what seems to be a better hands-on translation of this post, which I think does read a lot more nicely. So let's read the post and then talk a little bit about this. So it says, a little bird told us that Intel is already looking for partners to produce their next generation of graphics cards, of course in China, but as soon as they turned to well-known top-tier manufacturers and it became known to Nvidia began to threaten its partners that if they collaborated with Intel, Nvidia would not work with them anymore and they would not get the dies. So in other words, what it's saying is that, there's all the different board partners, and we don't have exact ones named here, right? But that produce the various GPUs for the various companies with the different cooler models, all of that. Now this appears to be Nvidia threatening them that if they also produce cooler models for Intel, that they will not get GPU dies from Nvidia. This would be very anti-competitive. I do not like to see this. Anyway, let's continue on with the quote. You have to remember that it already happened, only with AMD. Back then, Nvidia stipulated that their video cards and AMD video cards couldn't have the same branding. You had to name them differently. An uproar ensued. ASUS, for instance, had already created a separate brand, and Nvidia backed out under public pressure. So I believe what this is referring to is the infamous GeForce Partner Program. Now, I didn't have a YouTube channel, was not following the space as closely when all of that blew up. But that did become public, and obviously people got mad. They were called out for this, and Nvidia backed down. But this seems worse in the Intel regard here, and also, more behind closed doors, which you would, how do you get the public reaction if this is not made publicly known, right? And that's where this issue comes in. And again, this is, well, anyway, let me finish up the quote and I'll give some more thoughts here. So it says, so now the story has gotten even worse. Top-tier GPU OEMs apparently will not sign a deal with Intel, and the company is looking for second-tier partners. The public, had it known about the situation, could have shamed Nvidia this time around, but the situation is developing behind the closed doors at the level of company relations, and I got to know about it accidentally thanks to an employee of the company that apparently will sign a partnership with Intel. The Intel partner is unlikely to speak up and reveal the truth. Okay, so here's the problem with all of this. Again, this is a rumor, this is a leak. This, again, it says the Intel partner is unlikely to speak up and reveal the truth. So that's a problem, right? Because if something like this is happening, this is bad, this is anti-competitive. I'm not a lawyer, but I also have questions on, is this anti-competitive to the point of legal issues, right? I really don't know the regulations around all of that, but Nvidia has a massive market share in the GPU space, and using that to then pressure companies to not work with competitors certainly looks terrible. But once again, this is rumored, and I think until that there is 100% confirmation of this happening, we do have to be careful in our response. But I certainly don't like to see this happening, and I would like to see more confirmation if we could find anything like this taking place. And I wanted to bring this to your guys' attention because I really am excited to get a third competitor here in the GPU space with Intel. I hope they keep going, and I don't want to see it difficult for them to compete due to shady business practices like stopping other companies from working with them by withholding Nvidia GPUs. Again, allegedly, okay? So I do want to be super careful with all of that. Now, let's go to my next story. I got lots more to talk about here. I guess let's go with this one next because it's on the theme of companies with, bad anti-gamer, reputations, things like that. So let's talk about Denuvo. So I found this article over at WCCF Tech. It's interesting. It says, Denuvo wants to prove to PC gamers its DRM doesn't affect performance. So basically, whenever a new game comes out and announces that it has Denuvo DRM in it, there's always an outcry that people are afraid this means it'll wreck performance, they hate it, all of that. Now, apparently, there was an interview with the, I think it's the head of the company that owns the company that produces Denuvo DRM. And he was asked about this, but so his defense is that it's hard to prove the performance impact of Denuvo. Okay, so this is Steve Huynh, who's the chief operating officer of video games at Irdeto, which is the company that acquired Denuvo in 2018. Anyway, so he says, gamers almost never get access to the same version of a game, protected and unprotected. So he's saying over the game's lifetime, there may be a protected and unprotected version of the game, but those aren't comparable because they're different builds, over 6 months, many bug fixes, etc., which could make it better or worse. Okay, so what his claim is that when people do testing of the Denuvo version of a game and the version of the game without Denuvo, the performance differences can't just be explained by whether Denuvo's there or not, because it's likely a different patch version of the game, which can explain performance differences. So that's his claim. Now, this has been pointed out in the past a lot. What's interesting here is that they want to now offer a, how should I put it? He wants to allow select outlets testing of nearly identical versions of a game with and without Denuvo. Now, this is interesting, but I still don't think it would completely solve the issue that people have with this, Because basically he's acknowledging that people are obviously not just going to take his word for it, that performance is not significantly impacted. But he does want to allow select outlets, so I'm not quite sure who those would be and how you would get selected, testing of nearly identical versions of a game with and without Denuvo. So basically, you would want the same patch version of a game, one with Denuvo and one without, for more direct comparison. However, if the two versions of the game code and which games are being tested and all of that are coming from, from Denuvo, from the company, I think that still, I don't think would lay to rest everyone's concerns with these things. Although I think it would at least be interesting to see. What would be really interesting to see is if it actually did show that there were performance issues, even in the versions that they supply. But maybe there wouldn't be. But again, even if it didn't reveal issues, I still don't think this is going to solve everybody's trust issue because of, again, the way that the versions of the game would be being supplied. So anyway, I still thought this was an interesting article that Denuvo is at least trying to save their reputation here and maybe allow some testing in more apples-to-apples capacity on this. Now, speaking of things that people maybe don't like very much, how about the 4060 Ti 16GB, which I think people would like if it wasn't coming in at a $100 price premium over the 4060 Ti 8GB, which people already feel is too expensive, partially due to only being 8GB at that price. But anyway, so Andreas Schilling, who I think works with Hardware Lux, tweeted, "Talk to some AIB partners. It looks like very few are interested in promoting the GeForce RTX 4060 Ti 16GB in a big way. You can already see that in how many fewer models there are compared to the standard variant. It's getting close to the GeForce RTX 4070. So what's the kind of issues that we're talking about here? So not only is the price high, so you might be worried about low demand, but coming in at $500, and then with the 4070 coming in at $600, it gets close there where board partners might be worried about if they offer nice cooler models there, how much room do they have to mark up the price before it gets to the same price as the cheaper 4070 models, which we're already seeing reports of here. Now, I believe this is pricing converted to US dollars coming from a Chinese pricing source. But I'm seeing over here at WCCF Tech a report that ASUS's ROG Strix variant of Nvidia RTX 4060 Ti 16GB costs over $600, putting it more expensive than the RTX 4070, right? As the prices get closer together, then the more expensive cooler models of the worse the less performant graphics card then becomes more expensive than the faster graphics card with the worse cooler, right? Again, this looks to be based on a report from IT Home that the charge would be 46.99 RMB, which would convert to 650 US dollars. Anyway, now, despite the tweet here saying that there are fewer models compared to the standard variant, all of that, it does look like MSI, at least, is readying a kind of unique cooler model for the 4060 Ti launch with the GAMING X SLIM GPU. So this is a white color scheme, and I guess compared to their normal GAMING X lineup, it takes up fewer slots. The normal Gaming Trio series is black and has a 2.5 slot cooler, and this is apparently white and is slimmer, although it's hard to tell from the photos. It doesn't look like there's official numbers yet on exactly the exact measurement there. But anyway, I do think that a lot of these cards, don't. One of the biggest things about the 40 series is that it doesn't draw that much power, which would mean that you should be able to get very small cooler model designs fitting into then smaller cases and builds and form factors and all of that, which would be nice if they would actually, just make smaller graphics cards. I think from the board partner perspective, though, you have the issue that if you make too small of a graphics card, some people will just feel like it's worse, right? You see what I'm saying? Like having the big bulky card maybe sells better just because it, looks more physically impressive or something like that. Kind of a weird situation, but some people certainly are looking for a smaller build where you would want thinner and smaller designs. Now let's move into a little bit of CPU news here. So we're seeing reports on the Intel's Raptor Lake Refresh, which would fit into its current motherboards. So you would get one more generation of chips on that same motherboard from the 12 series and 13 series. It's looking like we're getting a bit of a time frame here about the refresh debuting in October. This is a Tech Power Up article, but apparently the information is coming from a Chinese outlet, Enthusiast Citizen, which has leaked a whole bunch of stuff in the past and has gotten a lot correct. And apparently the info is that the refresh, which will be called the 14th Gen series, has a release window around the 42nd week of 2023, which would be between October 17th and 23rd. And he believes that the non-K models would then arrive during the first week of 2024. So first you'd get the K series, looks like in mid-October, and then the non-K series in the first week of 2024. We also have rumors about the configurations, what is different in this refresh. So what does the refresh actually get us? Looks like at least the 14700K has some specs leaks. It looks like it would have an 8P core and 12E core configuration, which is interesting because that's an additional E-core cluster. So basically you get more efficiency cores than the 13700K, which should help its multi-core performance, which then leads me to my next report, which is here at videocards.com. They're reporting that a leak of some Cinebench and CPU-Z results are out for a chip claiming to be the 14700K. This would probably be some kind of early-ish engineering sample, that kind of a thing. Now, in the leaked scores, the multi-threaded performance does show a nice bump. In CPU-Z, it's showing an 18.2% improvement over the 13700K, and in Cinebench, it's showing a 16.9% improvement over the 13700K. However, the single-threaded performance is only showing 3.8% and 4.2%, or if you average those two, a 4% uplift in single-threaded performance over the previous generation 13700K, which means for my audience, which I think is, my channel skews in the gaming PC direction. In gaming, the single-threaded performance would be the more relevant uplift. So it's looking like in terms of gaming performance, this will probably not be particularly exciting. Although, hey, it's something. So maybe if you are on your 12 series and then you eventually wanted to upgrade to the highest end thing that'll fit in your board, maybe you could get a 14 series chip, something like that. But anyway, interesting results, and it's at least nice to get an extra set of chips coming out for the same motherboards, at least. That's better than that not being the case, even if the single-threaded uplift isn't amazing. And hey, the multi-threaded performance uplift is more exciting for people who actually are doing applications that do utilize all of the cores. Now, in other CPU news, in my last news video, I reported on a leak that we would probably be seeing a Ryzen 5 7500F, which is interesting in that the F here seems to be adhering to Intel's naming scheme of using an F to indicate there's no integrated GPU. So this would be like an iGPU-less 6-core. So basically, it's a 7600 or 7600X Ryzen, but without the iGPU. Now, in further confirmation, this probably is coming out, and also in some performance numbers, we are seeing benchmark results reported here at wccftech.com. Now, the benchmark appears to be Geekbench 6, which then has some, published average results for other CPUs, which you could then check how it stacks up against. So it looks like in the multi-thread performance here, in this WCCF Tech chart, and credit to them for putting this together, we actually see the, where is it? The 7500F right here, coming in near the performance of the 7600X, but actually a little bit ahead. But again, to be clear, what we're seeing here is a leaked benchmark of the 7500F versus, you know, some kind of stock number for the 7600X. We don't, right? So this isn't like a full review where you're just having one reviewer make sure you're on the exact same platform, swap out the CPU. And again, this is just a Geekbench 6 result. So I'm not saying confirmed the 7500F is faster than the 7600X, but I would say at least it seems to be in that same ballpark. And again, just the fact that these leaked scores exist is further confirmation that this chip is being tested. Anyway, in single-threaded results, we now see the 7500F giving similar performance to the 7600X, although it looks like technically slightly less. But again, given the nature of these results and what we're looking at here, I think it's just confirming that the performance should be close to the 7600X and also the 7600, there's a non-X, right? Yeah, by extension. Anyway, so I'm certainly interested in this. My main thing would be how much cheaper is it without the iGPU? Because the iGPU is certainly nice to have, but I would love to see more price competition at the, for the 7000 series. Because right now, it still looks like the 5000 series Ryzens with cheap motherboards, cheap RAM, and like a 5600 coming in around $130 or $140 right now. For somebody on a budget, it's still hard to go up to the DDR5 and the 7000 series, even though the prices have come down on the DDR5 and the motherboards and the 7000 series chips. Like I said, I would like to see them expand lower on the pricing structure for still good performance, especially in gaming. Now, in other interesting AMD CPU news, this is coming from the recent video from Gamers Nexus, which is really cool. It's like an hour-long documentary talking about they got into the AMD labs and were able to show off a whole bunch of cool stuff. One of them being that that AMD was apparently playing around with a vapor chamber inside of these the Ryzen 7000 chips. Now, this didn't come to pass because I think it just didn't end up offering enough of a performance bump to be worth the extra cost of developing. But it is cool to see, what if, and just see a vapor chamber design on the CPU like that. Pretty cool. Now, in other AMD news, we are seeing a new GPU driver release. I had reported on this earlier as a beta driver highlight, but this does look like it's now made the main release. And one of the big things here is in the reported fixed issues, certain virtual reality games or applications may encounter suboptimal performance or occasional stuttering on RX 7000 series GPUs. A lot of people I'd seen in my comment sections, I don't test VR performance. I don't currently have a VR headset. I do understand that that is something that a lot of people care about, though. And I had seen, at least in comments, it reported that the 7000 series was not a great choice for VR, and people were waiting for driver updates to fix this. Well, apparently this is now listed as a fixed issue, although like I said, I'm not set up for testing VR, so I can't personally validate these claims, although hopefully some other channels or outlets do, and we could see the results. Another interesting highlight here is reportedly fixed the high idle power when using certain display setups. However, I've read the comment section talking about this driver update, and a lot of people reporting that their idle power is still high. However, there were some other comments saying that theirs did improve. So it certainly seems like this may have improved for some people, but not solved it for everybody. And it's now, but now this has been removed from the list of known issues, which then means that this is probably would indicate that maybe that's as good as it's going to get. AMD's done what they're going to do here. So sorry if your situation didn't improve. Anyway, a couple other fixes and known issues and all of that for the driver release. And let me talk about this. This seems like a bit of an interesting update, just in the sense of it's okay. The infamous 12 VH power connector of melting connector fame when the RTX 4090 launched. It's looking like ASUS is actually bringing this power connector to one of their RTX 3060 Ti designs. This is the Atlas Shark GPU. And that's interesting in that they actually had already released this one with the older version of the 12-pin connector that came out with the Founders Edition cards from the 30 series. Maybe just due to that connector design maybe drying up, as maybe manufacturing is switching to including the 4 sense pins for the official 12VH design. Anyway, it just seems interesting to see them switching over to that design when they hadn't been using it before. So apparently maybe that design is gaining some popularity in some spaces. And then the last thing I want to leave us with is this actually the handheld that I've been looking for? So I keep talking about various Steam Deck competitors. I call them that, although Steam Deck was certainly not the first company out there, although they certainly have seem to further popularize the space. And I currently use a Steam Deck. My biggest complaint on it isn't actually its performance, although performance bumps are certainly nice if they're available. The screen is okay, but like compared to something like a Switch OLED, yeah, the Switch is nowhere near the performance ability of a Steam Deck, but that beautiful OLED screen certainly makes some games actually be, I might prefer to play it on my Switch, But anyway, the point is, AYANEO AIR 1S Ultra Thin and Light console. So basically, we're getting a Ryzen 7 7840U design coming from AYANEO with their AIR 1S, and it looks like it has an AMOLED display. So I am very interested in this. Also, they're going for an actual very thin and light design. A lot of these handheld consoles aren't really something you're gonna actually fit in your pocket, unless you have very deep pockets. Anyway, so looking at the specs of this, this videocards.com article I think is the best one highlighting it. Because it talks, it has this nice chart here summarizing how it stacks up against the ASUS ROG Ally and Valve's Steam Deck, which I think are the main competitors in the space, although there certainly are a whole bunch of other ones. Now it looks like we're getting the 1S design as well as a 1S Ultra Thin design. Which we don't know full specs on all of this, but again, what's interesting me is a 5.5-inch 1080p 60Hz AMOLED display. So I'm very interested in that. Also, pricing, it looks like the ultra-thin model is over $1,100, whereas the 1S version does have a base model available at $899, which had 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabyte SSD. Although jumping up a model does get you to 32 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte. Now, since these graphics, if these APUs share memory between, the VRAM and the system RAM, I certainly think having 32 rather than 16 may be worth that bump. But again, performance benchmarks would be interesting. And again, this being based on the 7840U does mean it comes with the Radeon 780M 12CU RDNA 3 based GPU, which in and of itself has more horsepower, raw horsepower, than the Steam Deck. Although, as we've seen with the ROG Ally, at the kind of power draw levels that you'd be wanting to use in a handheld for good battery life, the Steam Deck certainly did still put up a good fight at those lower power draw targets. So anyway, I'm very interested in this device because if it was able to compete with the Steam Deck, or hey, maybe even go higher due to the newer hardware, but with a nice AMOLED display, it certainly has something to go for it. Now, the ROG Ally didn't go with the OLED, but it does have a 1080p 120Hz variable refresh rate display, and also goes brighter. And I think the Steam Deck display also goes brighter as well, because that's one of the downsides to OLED. But I'm not usually using it outside, so for me, not that big of a deal. And we are seeing a July release date here and all of that. So anyway, I'm going to look a little more into this one. Might meet my personal needs for the gaming handheld, but I don't know. Is it enough for me to bother getting it if I already have a Steam Deck? I don't know. Anyway, might be interesting to justify the purchase to make some content about on the channel. I don't know. We'll see. Are you guys interested? All right, guys. I think that's what I got for you in hardware news today. Huge thank you to subscribers, viewers, channel members who hit the join button supporting financially. That's awesome. I am going to try to get out a few more members extra videos. And these aren't paywalling videos that I would otherwise post on the channel, but more just stuff that wouldn't really make sense in the YouTube algorithm, but might be interesting to channel members. For example, I've recently been testing out the Power Color Hellhound 7900 XT, and I did a bit of an unboxing thing on that for channel members recently, and I'll try to get more members extras out there to thank people who do directly support the channel financially, which is incredible. Anyway, I hope all of you have an excellent day.